Okay, great. All right, so I'd like to welcome a regular member of our group, Dave G, to speak. And it's all yours. Take it away.
Thank you. Hi, guys. Dave G here, an alcoholic from Southern California, actually in Orange County. And I used to put OC there, but no one really knew what it was. All the people I've looked at, what's OC? And it was like Orange County. And there used to be a TV show about it. And then recently people have been calling me the OG from the OC, which was kind of funny because I originally thought it meant the old guy, which it doesn't mean that. It means the original guy. But I'm changing that right now too. So the OG will stand for Ohio guy, because that's where I'm from originally, Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio area. I thank you all for being here, and I hope I can help out and hope I can provide some insight into where I came from and how I got to this point. And I'll probably tell you a lot about my youth and then as I grew up when I started drinking, things like that. But all I know right now is that I can't take that first drink. And that's the important part of this whole situation. I cannot take that first drink. And it reminds me of the old Lay's potato chip, but you can't eat just one. And that's where I can't take one drink because I will just keep going and going and going. Any new members here, welcome. I'm glad you're here. So let me talk about where I came from. I grew up in Cleveland. I'm a boomer, grew up in the late 50s, early 60s in Cleveland area. So I'm a boomer. It's about 2 hours north of Columbus, Ohio. So if Todd's on, I don't know if he's on here or not, but there he is. And yeah, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. My dad, my grandfathers, everybody were drinkers, except for my mom. She only drank occasionally at meetings and, at social events. She'd have one drink or highball. Highball was her thing. My thing was nothing at that time because I was just a kid. But we used to think about drinking beer. We pretend to be drinking beer, things like that. My parents argued all the time. My mom and dad used to get into super duper fights when I was like 3, 4, 5, and as far back as I could remember. And would wake us up in the middle of the night. For us, middle of the night was 9 o'clock to be in bed to get ready for school the next day or whatever, but wake us up in the middle of the night with screaming and yelling and, stomping and whatever else was going on. And I can remember waking up, going down there, telling them, just stop this already. Please stop arguing, stop fighting. And, they would settle it down a little bit at that point in time, but they basically tell you, go back to bed, we're working on this is adult things and we have to, do this. My dad was always drunk when that occurred. I don't think he ever abused her, but I don't know for sure because mom never talked about it later on in life. My wife probably knows more because she spent more time talking to my mother than I ever did probably, and I regret that. I had 2 younger brothers at the time, and I was the oldest. And that's the worst place to be, is being the oldest. I hate being the oldest because I was the one that would be the one to try things out and the one who would test mom and dad and find out how far can I carry something out. The younger brothers would watch and go, oh, we better not do that because he got his butt beat, And my dad was a disciplinarian and believed in corporal punishment. So, many times he got that belt out, snapped it, and then we'd get it on our butts. I can remember the old thing, from the Ralphie thing from Christmas Story, wait till your dad gets home kind of thing. When your dad gets home, you're going to get it. And sure enough, dad would get home and we'd be scared for the next 2 hours till dad showed up at home. And he came home drunk usually, and he'd get the belt out, he'd smack us. Mostly me. Mom sometimes would intervene and try not to, get dad to do as much, swats, 2, 3 swats with a leather belt hurt. It really hurt. I remember that. And she would try to get him to settle down and, get his mind off of doing something else. So she was kind of trying to intervene all the time. But typically when she intervened, it would cause another argument. So then it got circular, kept going on and on. An argument would start, the next day get beat again, whatever. And the things I did, I didn't think were that bad, except for, let's see, when I was 3, I my cousin was living with us at the time. We painted a car with house paint. That was not a good idea. It was not a good idea. I remember that. I was also raised Catholic. So from day one, we went to Catholic church. I went to a Catholic school the first 6 grades, actually. I can remember the Baltimore Catechism to this day. Who is God, blah, blah, blah. And you would, memorize it, say it out. I think that's where a lot of my reservation is towards going to in-person meetings and seeing those things up on the wall, and everybody's saying them up like they're not even reading them, they just say them because of rote memorization. And I suppose it's good. For me, it just takes me back to that time of having to memorize all those questions and answers. So that's one reason I had some issues with that. I finished grade six years at that school in 5 years, though, because I skipped 4th grade. I skipped 4th grade because I was extremely good at taking tests. At first, the homework was okay, but by 3rd grade, I stopped doing homework. I got, all my report cards came back, didn't do homeworks, but I was acing every test, and I ended up with straight A's those first 6 years of school. Whether it was the material or whether it was because of my curiosity, I'd bury myself in books. I'd read as much as possible. When I was in 3rd grade, I skipped 4th. I would go to the library all the time. I would go to the Cleveland Library and I would spend time in the library. I'd get books, bring them home. I'd be reading all the time. Kind of kept me away from what was going on in the house at the time. I'd go to the bedroom and read, go sit down on the couch, wherever, and read all the time. I knew I had straight A's all the time because every year I would get tickets to the baseball game, Cleveland Indians at the time, and they would give free tickets out to every straight A student, which is kind of fun. So we got to go to the baseball game for free. My parents had to pay for their ticket, but that's their problem, not mine. I had a lot of issues at a young age, not just the arguments and not just the beatings from dad or whatever. And I can't say it was beatings all the time. I mean, Dad did try to help us out on certain things at times, but a few things happened when I was about 5 and 6 years old. At 5 years old, my mom attempted suicide. She OD'd, but I found out about it because Dad woke me up in the middle of the night at 5 years old, had me go. Mom was laying in the living room on her back and barely coherent, and he told me to stay there and keep her awake while he was getting on the phone. At that time, there was no 911. He had to call the fire department and everything else, trying to get somebody to come to the house. So I had to stay there and try to keep her awake. And seeing my mom laying on the floor, listening to her babble, things like that. I mean, this is a memory that just came back not too long ago. I mean, at the time, I probably repressed it because it just came back to me. Maybe since I've been sober. My dad made me actually sit on her chest basically, and then he told me slap her, keep slapping her, keep her awake. It's like, I got to slap my mom. I mean, that was like very traumatic for somebody who's 5 years old and trying to keep her awake because she's going to die. I mean, God, I was crying, trying to keep her awake, and I didn't want her to die. Eventually the ambulance came, took her to the hospital. Luckily, I had grandparents lived across the street, so we could just go over there really quick. We stayed with them for the night. There was no therapy, counseling, anything at that time for kids going through a situation like that. We just have to live. We just have to come back. Mom came back home after they pumped out her stomach and did whatever they had to do. I think it was like 2 days she was in the hospital. She had no therapy. They didn't have it back then, or Dad didn't want it, or whatever. I don't know why. It felt like we were being abandoned because I thought my mom was going to leave us by killing herself. It was like a scary situation for me. Later that same year, I almost lost my dad. My dad was an electrician for the power company in Cleveland, and he was electrocuted by a 11,000 volt jolt across the back of his head, down his arm. And he's lucky for one thing. He was working, it was a very hot day in a vault at a steel company, and he was sweaty, extremely sweaty. So he was like soaking wet, which is actually helped the charge go across his skin. He burnt from his neck on down. He burnt all the way down his arm. We found out about it from my mom telling us. We went to the hospital to go visit with him, but the problem was we couldn't actually go in to see him. We had to look at him through a window at the time, and that was an outside window at the hospital where he could come because of fear of infection and things like that. My dad was resuscitated by his coworker. His heart stopped. He was resuscitated. It was one of the first chest compression and mount-to-mount resuscitations back then. This is back in like 1961. So this is when it was first starting a lot of the resuscitation techniques. He was burned severely. If he hadn't been saved by his coworker, basically he would have been dead. And that scared the crap out of me too. I would be without a dad, be without a mom, be without a dad. And these all happened around the same time. Back in the books I went, read books, do good in school, do the best I can. However, right at that time in school is when my behavior changed in school. That's when all my citizenship and all my, how I was behaving in school, listening to the teacher, all went south. My grades, perfect. Grades stayed up great, no problem. I could do all the tests and all the homework. My grades, my citizen grades and religious grades went down too, by the way. So it was kind of cool looking back at I found my old report cards and actually was looking at them recently from my mom. Later, maybe 2 years after that, my mom and dad were arguing. I was probably about 6. My dad and mom were arguing really bad one night, and dad came in to talk to the 3 boys, all 3 of us came in to talk to us. And I was there, and he was asking us, if you have to go to court and the judge asks you, who do you want to live with? What are you going to say? I was like, what are you talking about? At 6 years old, I have to decide who I'm going to live with, But he was really concerned that, we would pick mom, we would pick dad. I'm like, well, why do we have to pick? Aren't you both going to be here? Kind of thing. Well, we might be getting a divorce. So that, I don't know if a lot of this affects how I am now, but a lot of this I think about now, and I can still feel the same feelings that I had back then. Granted, I'm much older and understand a lot of what happened, but the feelings come back every now and then. So just want to stay there. I became the class clown. Actually, I got to be really good at being the class clown, making people laugh, getting the nuns we had really PO'd at me all the time. I spent a lot of time down in the principal's office, being hit with a ruler. Back then, it was still smack you with a ruler, that was okay. All I can remember the one time, I think it was in fifth grade, where the nun took me back in a coat room. We had rooms in the back of the classroom where the nun took me. And she said, okay, you're getting punishment. And she raised that ruler. And I went, not this time. And I ran out the door, ran around the whole classroom with her chasing after me, running. And I ran out the door, and guess where I went? To the principal's office, because that's where I was going to be anyway. So that's where I went. Good thing in that time, because I was in 1963. The date was actually November 22nd, 1963. That happened in the morning. Well, on the radio in the background, while I was sitting in the principal's office, the news came on that Kennedy was shot. And I was like, oh my God, the president got shot, and the first Catholic president got shot, and everything had happened. And I was like, hey, I'm not going to be in trouble today. That was the first thing I thought. I'm out of here. And what they did, they closed school. We all went home. It's like, phew, wow, got off of that one. I don't have to get punished for that now. They're not going to tell mom and dad what I did in class that day. We were free range kids, basically. We were free range kids, ran around, grew up in the day when you could go out and be gone all day long, come back at sunset, or come back when the lights come on, basically on the street. And that's kind of what we did. I had other problems. We moved at the time. Later on, we moved to the white suburbs of Parma, Ohio, which was probably the whitest suburb in the entire USA at the time. There may have been other ones, but we had our few Black people that were living there, a few Mexicans living. It was very, very racist where I grew up in Parma, extremely racist. We did that for white flight. The problem with that is when we moved to Parma, I had to go away from the Catholic schools where I was a class clown and well-liked and, had friends, everything like that in sixth grade. Had to move to a public school where I knew nobody, absolutely nobody. And it became a hard time for me trying to integrate into that situation. And public school was hard to start with. I even had teachers tell me, this isn't like Catholic school anymore, where you get by because your parents donate money to the church. I said, oh, whatever, So I had my problems. I ended up finding out that with my background of reading and books and science background, that I could get in with the bad crowd by selling them components to make smoke bombs, fireworks, things like that. I didn't make the fireworks. I didn't sell them stuff like that, but I sold them components with the instructions on how to do it. I was the dealer of that kind of thing back in junior high. I got suspended for 3 days for that. Finally, somebody finked on me or whatever, and I got in trouble for that. And that's probably the closest time when I first drank, right after that. I was probably like 13 years old. And I remember raiding the liquor cabinet of neighbors because my dad would keep a case of beer all the time in the house, but he would count it. I knew he counted. I knew he kept track of how many he had. So if we actually stole one of them beers, had one, and put the bottle back in there, that kind of thing, he would know that one was missing. I think he just kept it on his fingers or whatever he did. He kept count of how many was there. So we raided the neighbor's liquor cabinet. I had a couple shots, vodka, I think it was at that time. And it was like, okay, this isn't going to kill me, but boy, hey, that's a nice buzz I'm feeling basically. And I just, oh, okay, good. Then I had to hide it from mom to get home. The next day I remember I had a little bit of a hangover, a headache. I was like, oh, well, that's not good. So I didn't really drink after that a whole lot. It was a couple of times here and there where I'd have a couple of drinks at parties that we'd have. But kind of like back to high school, I had books, I had guitars, I played guitar, and that was my addiction in high school. I also started smoking, which was actually a bad idea, but at the time we were allowed to smoke in high school. They actually had a smoking area for students. I also had a good friend at that same high school, actually, because we had a unique relationship. We were born on the same exact day. My mother shared the same exact room at the hospital, and they got to be friends. And I found out about this later when I moved to Parma later on. So we became good friends just because we had a good birthday together. We made all kind of plans for after graduation. We were going to go travel the country, drive with a van, and go across the country. That didn't work. He decided on the day of commencement, he said, oh, by the way, I just enlisted in the Air Force. And it was like total shock to me, like, oh, okay, that's nice. There goes my plan. So my plans changed. And instead of during that summer break going on a trip, I ended up working for my dad. He was an electrical contractor at the time. And I worked for him, but the problem with working with him is every day after we got done, we would have to stop at the bar on the way home. Dad would go in, have a shot, beer, whatever. And then I'd be sitting in the truck waiting for him to come out because I didn't want to go sit in the bar with him or anything like that. And here I am, an alcoholic. So he ended up firing me by the end of that summer because I didn't want to sit with him no more in there. And I was getting ready to go to college, local college, Cleveland State University. And that's where I really started drinking. Cleveland State University at that time, I was 17 when I first started, and I turned 18 in the year I was in my first year in college. And 3.2 beer was allowed in Ohio. So 3.2%, was probably more like 4.5% beer at the time. They said 3.2, but so I remember going down and buying my first 6-pack, using my ID and stuff like that, and drinking all 6 of those beers probably in an hour. And I got pretty smashed. And I was driving that day too, but I never got caught. Never got caught. Ended up going down to OU, Ohio University, and partying down there. And that's not too far from where Courtney's at, a couple 100 miles, I think, not too far. But party down there was really big time partying. It was on weekends. I didn't go to school there, but I had friends and we drank Harry Buffalo, as they call it. Everybody would chip in and you'd have people bring all their drinks with them. We pour it into one trash can lined trash can. And you pour in some tropical punch, basically tropical fruit punch, and you drink that stuff, whatever is in there, you'd be drinking it. And so I got drunk at there. I can remember driving back after that, being, the next day having the hangover from hell, trying to drive back up to Cleveland, Ohio, which is about a 3-4 hour drive almost. Especially when I was drunk. I ended up getting married. I met my wife, got married. Lovely woman. We had our first child 269 days after our wedding. It was one of those, wedding babies. Beautiful daughter. I'll carry it forward because I'm wasting a lot of time here. Went to my brother's wedding one time. My daughter was a little bit older, and I had been drinking beer on a regular basis. Beer was my go-to drink. Went to a wedding, brother's wedding, and my daughter was a flower girl. And during the wedding celebration, typically I hang out at the bar, and everybody else has their party, and I hang out at the bar drinking. My daughter ended up coming up to me, I guess. I didn't know this at the time because I was probably too drunk, but she tugged at me and wanted to dance with me, and I brushed her off. And that's one of the things I regretted so much. And when my wife told me about it the next day, and that we were talking about getting a divorce because of the way I was drinking, and Daddy was an asshole, he didn't want to dance with me, kind of thing. I was unavailable for her at that time because I was drunk. That was my first encounter with AA. I went to my first AA meeting shortly after that. My wife had been going to Al-Anon. Went to marriage counseling. I did it at work. I worked at the Cleveland Clinic Foundation. I was a very highly functional electronic engineering person. So I worked with a lot of doctors. And lo and behold, I go to the first meeting and I see all these doctors that I know were at this meeting. And I was like, kind of amazed. Most of them were there for drugs, but I was just amazed seeing all these people that were at this meeting. I went for a few months, but the religious stuff got to me after a bit, and the hand holding and all that kind of thing. I had my resentments, the church, that I didn't want to do it. So I'll get done here in a second. I went to the Catholic Church. I had a lot of resentments by the Catholic Church, and I lost my religion, but that's neither here nor there. I'll talk about that later sometime. We moved to the suburbs. I had a nice house. I got a job in California. I wanted to move to California, so I moved to California. I was sober for most of the time that we were living in Ohio after that, after I got out of AA. There were times when I would lapse, have a couple drinks, but it was never where I got to the point where I was drinking heavily. We moved to California, and that's when I started drinking again. Friends at work wanted me to have a beer or two after work, and that's what happened. I would start drinking again. I could stop for a week, 2 at a time, not a problem. I would just stop, go and do things, go on vacation, fly back to Ohio and not drink, go back and help my mom get her settled in a assisted living place and things like that. I would fly back and help her with that, and I wouldn't drink, except on a plane. So planes I drank. I found out all the unique places to get free drinks on a plane, not just in first class. Most American flights, if you want to know, you can sit in the exit rows and they'll bring you free drinks if you sit in the exit rows. The stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Stupidest thing. Let's get all the people in the exit rows drunk so they can't figure out how to open the doors. You know, it doesn't make any sense, but I knew how to get a free drink. So I kept drinking. I took off a year or two drinking while I was out here because my wife and I got into arguments again. Off and on. And then for like 2 years before I changed jobs again, I stopped drinking entirely. I just stopped. I just didn't want to do it and all. I had other things to do. I was concentrating on getting another job, switching jobs again, which I did. I was in the medical imaging industry. And I did change jobs. I went to be a trainer at Toshiba at the time. Halfway through that, I was getting tired of it. I was a serial job changer. Every 3 years, I had to change jobs. I had something had to change. I couldn't stay in the same position over and over and over again. So I would change jobs. I started drinking again, but it was sneak drinking. I would go out with the guys, have a couple beers, but then in between those days, I'd be sneak drinking in the garage. I would have little bottles I had and a big bottle, that kind of thing. I'd keep in the garage and go out, have a drink, come back in the house, watch some TV. Later on, sneak out, go have another beer, another drink, and then come back in. And the bad part about it was my wife asked me, have you been drinking? And I would say, no, I haven't been drinking. I'd be lying the whole time. So I didn't hide it that good, I guess, if she had to ask me, obviously. I thought about it. And when I went to retire, this is when I really had to sit down with myself, basically. When I retired, I said, I can't do this anymore. I just can't. This is crazy. Why am I doing this to myself? Why am I doing this to my family? But more importantly, to myself right now. This could kill me eventually. I'm 67 years old and I decided to retire. And at the same time, I talked to my wife and I said, I'm still drinking. I came out, I was honest with her, and she was shocked, obviously. We were going to my daughter's that weekend, and my daughter had been in AA for 3 years, and told her, and she said, well, we're going to a meeting. We got to go to a meeting. And I said, okay, I'll go to a meeting, which I did. And basically said, I'm an alcoholic at the meeting, and that it was a nice meeting. I had no problem with the people there, but the religious part of it bugged me a little bit. So my daughter and I talked. My daughter's also atheist, and she referred me to this group here, a secular recovery group. And I'll tell you what, I don't regret coming to this meeting one little bit. This has been the thing that keeps me sober, keeps me even from thinking about alcohol, even though we talk about it all the time. And the day I took off, I made it a very important date. And the day I stopped drinking was on the anniversary of my mom's death. It's also on the anniversary of her birth, because she died exactly 89 years after her birth on her birthday. And the bad thing about the day is I remember flying to go back to Cleveland because I was trying to see her before she did die. I took a card and wrote it out and everything like that. Going to get on the plane, not to get on the plane, but it's at the airport, and my brother called me and I was like, oh no. And sure enough, I missed her. So it hurts me. And that day is going to be really easy for me to remember. And I miss her. So I just want to say my last thing here, I've had 4 months now of sobriety, and I found this group of people here who understand a lot about me, even though I didn't tell you about me beforehand, because I can tell by what you're saying, you understand where I'm coming from. And I feel kinship with every one of you. And I feel okay because I can do this. And I just have to keep moving forward, moving those little things, listening to the pearls of wisdom that I hear every day at these meetings. And there's no way to pick and choose things in our past that affect us and say, that's the one thing that did it. This is the one thing that did it. It's a conglomeration of all those things added together that make me who I am. Social interaction with you guys has helped me a lot. And that's really all I say. I love you all, guys. Thank you.